So good morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday, February 17th, 2021. Time is 10:04 a.m. This is a special meeting with our Community Development Organization and our builder partners. I'm officially calling this meeting to order. Attending Commissioners Duncan, Brooks, and Filios. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. We have one business item, and it's a potential action item. It's a Kootenai County permit approval, concerns and ideas for resolution discussion with our local builders. Why don't we go around and introduce ourselves so everyone knows everyone else? Go right ahead.
Shawnee Anderson with Monarch Custom Homes.
Cameron Pogue with Silver Construction.
Cameron Peterson, Timber Ridge Homes.
Shelley Rosenberger, Rosenberger Construction.
Tom Jorgerson with Century 21 Bond.
John Mills, Building Official.
David Callahan, Community Development.
Okay, all set? All right then. So David, do you want to start for us? Or how would you like to proceed?
Sure. I think maybe some things I can share with all of you now that may help you feel better and know that things are changing and should be a lot better within the next 2 months. For instance, we had a lag of some 4 months where we were short as many as 5 people. In a department of 32, that's a huge impact. And 4 of the 5 were in building division. So an even greater impact. I mean, that's almost half the workforce in the building division. So you had our capacity doing this. Meanwhile, for the first time ever in the recorded history of the county, we are at a peak of building permits. We've never been anywhere near what we're processing right now. Today is roughly 45% over this time last year, which was the highest year on record. So you got these countervailing trends. Our capacity is going down, the requirements to meet things are going up. And of course, this doesn't work. So what we've done is we have actually filled all of our vacant positions with one that I think I'll hear today. And if we get that person today, he is fully certified, ready to hit the road running for plan review, which is our weakest link right now. The other thing we've done is we've hired a consultant that's doing 10 plans a week. We're in the process of getting to the board a contract next week for a second consultant out of Colorado, a group I know and familiar with. They're nationwide now because they've linked up with a California firm. They can do as many as 30 plans a week. That'll have a huge impact on where the bottleneck we have, which frankly the bottleneck's 4 months old at this point, where we've been up to here with 350 permits at a time that we literally can't get to with the 1.5 full-time people we have working on plan review. Again, that's changing.
Go right ahead, David.
But I believe all the things we've put into place should allow us to get through the bottleneck within, if my math is reasonable, 2 months. And that should get us back to about a 2 to 3 week turnaround for plan review, which is as fast as I've ever seen it in this county. It's still not my desired goal, which the building guys can't get their mind around this, but I've always wanted 2 to 3 days because I've had the luxury of doing that in places like the city of Dallas and other places where it's frankly just easier because all the staff's in-house as opposed to what we have, which is a large part of the review is out of our control. PhD, fire districts, so on and so forth. But still, ultimately I would like to have a shorter turnaround time. I just don't know how to do that given our certain circumstances. The one other thing I have cooking is we have yet another possible consultant who's a retired building official, is willing to come out of retirement. He actually retired young. He only had a mere 32 years of experience. but as a chief billing official. And in this case, he was fully certified. He's going back and recertifying. I should know by the end of the week what sort of capacity he will have, whether we'll have to look at hiring him like we do Bob Ankersmith as temporary part-time, or if he's willing to incorporate, and then he'd be licensed and insured, and we could go that route. He would add roughly, I think, another 10 plans per week. So again, I've done everything I know to do at this point to get us outside of the bottleneck, but it has frankly been insufferable, and I am sorry. I know you've been delayed. I know that causes havoc in your organization, but I can't actually think of anything we could have done differently, because I didn't foresee losing staff and the ramping up, and I don't know how we could have.
And let me add to David's point. Just last month, we authorized fairly massive increases for the people in his group. These were increases that were not budgeted for this fiscal year, but he was running the highest turnover in the county, 23%, 1 in 4. And the sad part is we lose them to other jurisdictions. When we lose somebody to the city of Rathdrum for $11,000 more, and doing permits, or for that matter inspections in Rathdrum, is a virtual slam dunk because you're in the flats. Our people have to trek through hillsides, waterfront, remote properties and whatnot, so the job is more difficult and it's more challenging. But anyway, so we've taken the necessary measures as a board to try and stem that, the exit, if you want to call it an exodus, but 1 in 4 is high. Go ahead, David.
Thank you for reminding me, Chris. That much has been huge. It's an enormous boost to staff morale. For the first time ever in the county's history, most of the staff now is at market.
Yeah, Tom, go right ahead.
I'd like to laud the commissioners. And I know you probably get a lot of grief for raising salaries. I have lauded that forever. I spoke at length with Bill when Bill was first running. I've spoken to you, Chris Leslie. I'm not sure if I have with you, but that has long been since needed, and I think that is a very, very good directed source of county funds. So thank you for doing that.
Very welcome. It's our pleasure. Long overdue, by the way. Long over. Feel free, folks. We're here to listen to you. Cameron, go right ahead.
Can,
Thank you. I'd like to start out and thank Mr. Callahan, Mr. Mills,
sorry, all the way
for
up.
all of the
There you go.
hard work that you guys have put
There
in
you
through
go.
this time. I know I don't envy your job, and I wouldn't want to be in your position with all of us calling and trying to hound you to get things through. So I really appreciate you guys, and I want to also make it a fact that in all of our conversations with all the builders in this area, that Mr. Callahan and Mr. Mills their names got brought up multiple times on how good of a job they are doing. One thing you'll notice about, I would say, our group, we're not here with pitchforks or torches or anything like that. We're not stomping our feet and punching the walls or anything like that. We're here in good grace trying to come to a resolution to this serious matter. I mean, this is something that it's making me lose sleep at night. You're talking hundreds of employees. Selkirk Construction itself has 40 in-house employees and hundreds of trade partners that are being affected by this exact situation. And now you take those numbers and you times that by just the number in the room, and you're talking a huge portion of our community. It's not the entire community, no. And so you look at all the people that are affected by this, and you're talking a huge, substantial amount of everybody that works in construction. One of the main reasons that this is a problem for us, just to kind of voice it so everyone can hear, is our monthly bills. So plan review right now, we have a set of plans that have been in the county building department for just about 5 months, almost 6. We're paying interest on the land and the projects. We are having to retain key members of our team because without them, as we all know, skilled labor is very difficult to come by. And we know that when we sign these contracts, we need those people to do the work. So we're having to retain those people for months at time without anything for them to do. We're having to find tasks on the side, have them do work at our shop and things like that to keep them busy. And I know we'll all roll our eyes at this one, but it's opportunity cost. It's huge. I mean, when you add all these numbers up, again, then you times them by the amount of people in this room and then everybody affected, you're talking thousands and thousands of dollars. Another huge reason this is a major issue is losing subcontractors. So we all sit in this room, and if you can really pay attention to the people in this room, we're probably the biggest competitors in this market, and we're all sitting next to each other trying to come to a resolution to this issue. And every single day, I think we would all agree we're trying to make sure our subcontractors don't go to the other. And in this situation, that's exactly what's happening. When Selkirk doesn't have a permit that comes through, guess where they go? They go to my competition after working with me for 8 years. There aren't a lot of skilled labor in this area or labor that can do the projects that we do. And so losing them to other areas, a lot of them are going down to Boise and areas like that there's a lot of work. That's a huge, huge loss. And then also, let's talk about the increased material costs. So 6 months ago, back in January, well, I guess a year ago, back in January, we saw an increase in lumber about 50% across the board, and in trusses more than that, or about 15%. So on a standard job of ours, we saw an increase of about $15,000, so a little bit over 50%. For material costs, we're seeing increases at least $10,000 a job. Now, that's over a year ago, and if you look back from 6 months, our pricing has gone up at least another 5% in material, framing material, siding material, and then we're also seeing increases in electrical supplies as well as drywall and insulation just within the past 6 months. So you add all these monthly bills and these things that are adding up on us, and it's daunting. We're bidding these projects a year before, and we're promising these homeowners, this is your set price. And when we're having to wait for our permit, it's killing us. I mean, we are local people, and it's really affecting our businesses. So I have a lot of other notes, but you guys hit on most of them. The lack of employee retainage, I've heard nothing but great things about working for the county, but I've heard a lot of it being the pay. And to hear that you guys increase the pay is great. That is awesome, and I can't applaud you more for that. You have some very, very skilled and great people working for your division, and you should be proud of that. Our goal, I would love 2 to 3 days, but I'm not going to say that. Our goal is 1 month plan review. At the time that this was put together, it was also the timing of inspections to increase those, but so far, within the past few months, that has drastically increased and been great. The proposal that we were going to bring was pay increases. This was something that you guys hit it on the head. However, I hate to be the guy in the room that says that's not really, 2 months is not something we can wait on. We're needing to discuss something, a quick action resolution to this. And one thing that we're proposing in this room, so as a builder, we hold the whole liability of the project, the home, and everything, to where if it's not on the plan review or on the plans, we are still liable to making sure it's built per code. So an example of that, we just received a plan that came through, and again, Mr. Callahan, Mr. Mills, don't think I'm attacking you or any of your department, but we just received a plan that took 4 months to get approved. We began construction. We got the foundation in place, and my superintendent, the foundation or the truss manufacturer, and the framer all met on site and realized that there was 2 bearing pads that were missed through engineering, R phase, and community developments inspections. And Selkirk Construction held the liability to ensure that those were in place without me having to call Mr. Callahan and say, hey, what do we do about this? We called the engineer and got this resolved without the community development department's input at all. Yet we took pictures and ensured that it was done per the engineer's recommendations to ensure that it would pass the county's requirements. Another thing that has come up last week, a final inspection we received, one of the items we failed on was an item that was nowhere in the plan review's notes or a comment of the plan review. It was in the code, and so that was something that we missed. But we had the liability to, when the home is almost finished and the tile is installed and the appliances are installed, we had to cut out tile and put a register to bring in combustion air into a laundry room. Again, that wasn't on the plan review, and we were still held liable to ensure that that was in place. So what we are permitting, or what we are proposing, is foundation-only permits that are foundation-only permits on plans that have previously been built in the county, or those that are stamped by an engineer. The reason I say that is because at the end of the day, this would give the county more time to review these plans for life safety issues and concerns with any of the actual building envelope of it, and it would allow us builders to gain at least a month to 2 months of build time on our projects. This would allow, once we get the final permit through in those 2 months that the county is saying it needs, this would allow us to be able to get framers starting much sooner, at least 2 months starting before. And like I said, that would gain us about a month to 2 months of our time on those projects. A lot of people would call this kicking the can down the road, but what I'm seeing is that can is already getting kicked down the road because of the time that we're having to spend on these permits, because we don't have the time to spend on the permits. We have new people coming in that they're learning. Timbered Ridge shared something with me that I asked if I could share. And one of the things that they saw was they saw a plan review that came back after 10 weeks, and it's a project they had already built before. And the 2 notes on it was for a range hood CFM and a stair landing. And to people not in the building department, that may say, hey, that's a good one to talk about. But somebody in the building department, and I even think Mr. Callahan would agree, that's almost like saying make sure to use nails and build it per code. It's something that it needs to be said, but also we're liable to making sure it's done anyways, and so why did we need to wait 10 weeks to be able to get that note? So again, I appreciate everybody's time in this matter. A little bit of a jab or a conclusion to this conversation is, as a business owner, we look at our reviews every single day, and we ensure that we get the feedback of our customers to ensure that we are providing them the service that they need. And the county, as of right now, the building department has a 1-star review. It cannot provide the service that they're providing. And if people had options, frankly, you guys would be out of business. And so it's something that we need to come together and try to resolve this issue before us, as builders, go out of business. Thank you.
David, do you want to respond?
This will drive John nuts, but I like your idea. And I'm willing to go there with one caveat. Each of you, I know, have experienced cases where the engineer screwed up mightily. So just because it's stamped is almost meaningless. I hate to say it so bluntly, but that's the case. Here's a quick for instance. Some of the plans you guys have just given us said these are repeat performances. They are not. The truss loading was different. The mechanical was different. It was literally, even though it was the same plan with a mirror image, you didn't flip the mirror image on the mechanical and the truss load. That wastes all of our time, yours and mine. And so I think if we did your suggestion, I'm fine with it. You have to accept that when things are screwed up, you got to deal with it. And then we need our legal counsel to work through some sort of, I'm not at all concerned about liability. What I'm concerned, because we have none. What I'm concerned about is that we put into place properly the procedure whereby we are all acknowledging how this is going to work, and that under these circumstances, if we do it your way, it's your call. Okay.
Go ahead, John.
There's a couple of things on this. One of the policies or that we've recently put into play, we're still looking at getting it set up, is because of the people in this room, your designers are normally some of the better designers in the area. We're putting together a list of, I won't call them preferred designers, but not special attention, but because your plans go through quickly normally. They're either real good or, sorry to say it, real bad. But what we're trying to do is to identify certain designers that we can put on a fast track, that it's mostly processing. That is one of the things we're already getting started with. And I've been on your side of the table. It's been a long time, but I've been there and I understand exactly what you're going through. But that's one of the things we're trying now to see if we can get going on it. That's what we're trying to get figured out. Because how can we do it equitably without punishing the mother, the homeowner builder, or something like that? We can't put everything up front and let them get by the wayside. I think one of the things that will help so much tremendously is when we get up to full staff and we have the people and get out of the hole we're in. And then, frankly, I didn't forecast the way things have ramped up. I didn't forecast losing people.
Well, you also didn't forecast COVID and acting as an accelerant and the state leading the nation for growth, so that's a whole nother factor, but.
So I can't take all the blame, but I'll take part of it.
John, would you pass Shelley the mic, please? That's okay. We need to pick it up here.
There's no blame in this room for anybody. We understand. None of what we are experienced, anyone can stand back and say, oh, you should have predicted that. I think what we're asking for is that as businesses, we are nimble. That's how we survive. And so we're just asking you to partner with us and become more nimble. We understand what we're all facing. We're facing it too. We face COVID. We're facing the demand. We face people that quit, and we have to continually rehire. But we have to do it quickly, or we don't survive one-star reviews.
I have a couple of questions. David, when you say just so that we're all on the same page, what is it, to your understanding, that Cameron is suggesting that's different than versus today? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here.
If an engineered plan or an architecturally signed off plan came in, we could actually issue the permit within a few days or weeks if we need PhD and other agencies, rather than what we do now, which is even when it has a stamp, the staff still reviews it. Half the time we find major issues, like the ones I just described. But again, if all of us understand that you take on that responsibility and my attorney says that we can actually do that, I'm fine with it, because I am, frankly, like you, losing sleep. I have been literally waking up 5 times every night for the last 6 months. It is driving me crazy.
Okay. Go right ahead.
Just a couple other questions. I mean, I think we've all said, we know we couldn't have foreseen this. There's no blame at all. And like Shelley said, we're just trying to implement something quickly. We know it's difficult with municipalities to, it takes a lot of force to move a ship. So we get that. But we're just asking for something in the interim. The foundation-only permit would be a huge benefit, as Cameron said. We do take the liability either way. If it's missed, you guys can't catch everything. There's things every single day on the job site that we catch that you couldn't.
I promise we won't put trusses on backwards.
And so it's one of those things, I think we're already taking that liability and we're willing to. So
That reminds me of how, I'll ask Pat, but how we might actually approach this. But it seems like we have a prototype in place with the recent storm emergency ordinance we did, where it's an expedited review. I think our legal counsel could start with that as boilerplate and work up something on an interim basis to get us through this. I'll give all of us slack. I'll say with 3 to 4 months of room. But to me, it's worth every risk to get you the permits you need. I'm willing to go there.
Cameron, yeah, go right ahead, please.
So I know we've been through this before, probably, was it 3 years ago maybe, roughly? I mean, do we not, is there not a protocol that's already kind of been approved that, for the foundation-only permits? Because I know Cameron brought this up, and I think the frustrating part is we've been talking about this since Christmas time, and we're still here.
We have always done foundation-only permits, always. The problem has always been that we're triaging, just like a medical team does, to figure out which ones need the foundation only. And it's a back and forth between us and you, A. B, the foundation-only approach works only to the extent that the rest of your plans match. I'll say, be so bold as to say 50% of the time, that's not the case. Something's screwed up somewhere. The point loads, the foundation doesn't have the right footing, something. So that's why, to me, I mean, we're there, we're doing it, but I think the more robust approach at this point is really to find some legal means like we have done with the emergency ordinance to say, here's how we're going to do business starting at such and so date under these certain refined, defined circumstances.
Yeah, but David, you know, back to your earlier point, if half the plans are not as proposed, how are you going to handle that? Now, does this go back
That's
to
where
John's?
they take on the responsibility. And that's where I need Pat's brilliant legal advice
Okay.
of how do we make that happen under state law.
So let me make a comment here. If you look at, most people don't understand how the county functions, and I can tell you from half my life in private industry, I was in the tech industry. Kootenai County moves faster than the tech industry did. And I know that's hard for some people to digest, but we can move quickly. When we make a decision, we implement quickly. The point to remember here is the county has two primary responsibilities. Provide for collect taxes. We act as administrators for the state, so we take all the hits, and to provide for health and safety. Now, the fact that we don't have liability doesn't mean we should short circuit and allow things that endanger the public. And that's where we, out of conscience and a commitment to what's right, have to do the right thing. And on occasion, I'll get the calls where people are complaining. Typically, it's an individual more so than a builder, but on occasion, it's a builder. And naturally, I defer to David because I don't have the facts. And sure enough, the individual or the builder didn't provide certain things, so there's a disconnect between plan review and the builder. Well, you know, if the plan is incomplete, what are we supposed to do? And especially if the individual has had the time to provide those remedies and hasn't done so. So that's the concern that, you know, that I have. And if that's 50% of the cases, that's a lot. But going back to what John said, if there's an engineer out there that's short-circuiting the process and we're having an issue with, that individual's, his feet should be held to the fire. But for other folks who are cooperative and are doing a quality job, I have no issue. When you say, just for the sake of clarity, foundation-only permit, what does that mean?
They can't come out of the ground with anything at all until we've got the rest of the plan approved and permitted. So the foundation is as far as they can go in the field with a foundation-only permit. Or anything else.
So what are we doing today?
I didn't hear you.
What are we doing today?
Well,
If Cameron's suggestion
we do
is to shorten the
foundation-only,
interval,
we
go
do
ahead.
foundation-only permits today.
But I'm trying to get my arms around it because
You have to wait for everything.
Today, as far as foundation-only approvals, we aren't issuing foundation-only permits per se. We're issuing the complete
permit.
permit,
Right.
but with only foundation approvals. The issue is, and part of it is my mindset, that I need to see enough of the rest of the structure to determine with a reasonable idea that the foundation that we're approving will work without major changes or significant changes. That is a hard one for me to bite, as far as just giving an automatic carte blanche, go for it. I'm more than willing and very interested in pursuing this preferred provider list of getting an expedite on the ones that do the good jobs. because those are the ones that we can do quickly. The issue is setting up a procedure on how to implement it, to know whose permit gets expedited and whose doesn't, and that the expedites don't wash out the rest of them. It's a difficult situation. It's a fine line. There are jurisdictions that have premier builder programs where they just start building. They don't have inspections. But then when things do come to light and there's a problem, then it's a major problem because things have already been covered up.
Well, sure, absolutely.
So I think we have to understand that most of the time, builders and engineers are turning out quality products to you for review. Do we sometimes make mistakes? Sure. But I would hope that we keep that in mind, that the majority of the plans of competent builders come to you complete and ready to go. And so I hope we'd keep that in mind, that we're not making rules and regulations based on 5% of the population versus 95% of the customers that you serve.
David, do you want to jump in?
Before Tom jumps in, the part I still don't have my mind around, but I'm willing to pursue, is how we change our process in a way that still follows state law to allow you to get out in front of our actual approval of the permit. I don't know how that works. Or maybe it's we go ahead and issue the permit so that goes away, but
Inspections.
that's where the weirdness comes in, is how do we catch up with you and when, especially if you screw up midstream.
Today, I'll get to you in a second. I ran numbers this morning. In the last 30 days, for single-family dwellings, roughly half of the reviews that we did were approved. The other half were various corrections in them. For some of those plans, it was 4 and 5 times. I don't know that. He asked what percentage of it was foundation issues. I can't
But then,
answer
John,
that without going.
but then that takes us back to the list that you're going to be generating. Why don't we let Tom speak? Tom, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I have a few ideas on this. So the way I would see it working is, of course, there would be a legal document signed that states that if you go forward with this foundation, obviously the building department is still going to review the entirety of the plan. And it just has to simply be agreed upon. If you screwed up the whole foundation, if you didn't meet setbacks, if you screwed up any part of it, if there's not enough, rebar, because they're still going to be doing the inspections during the course of it. Now, the biggest thing I see is missing load points or something small like that, and that's just going to get added anyway. So the house isn't going to be able to proceed, and as long as the applicant accepts liability that says, look, you're on your own. If you do this, that's great, but whatever we say, you got to do, period, at your expense. So, I mean, I think that wouldn't be that big of a deal. And it would be, I agree with Cameron. I never thought of this. I was a little squishy on just taking a full set of engineer-signed plans and accepting a full building permit for that from the county, because I know that's been proposed. But I think if you can get out of the ground, one, it makes your client feel a lot better because they see something happening instead of going out there and still seeing a load of trees where the house goes. But, and then I would see that you could start to do, utilities, driveways. So you're able to do a lot more than just the foundation if you can get the foundation in. So I think that's a great idea. I also, without being discriminatory, like Cameron maybe mentioned, you come in and you do a little test, or it's based upon prior success with applications. I think that would be a phenomenal idea. The other thing I would say, David brought up something that I hadn't thought about, and I don't know what the legality is in Idaho, since virtually everybody that you talk to now is an elected official, right? highway districts, fire districts. So I don't know if there are any not municipalities, any governmental agencies that are willing to, for example, to me it seems like for Panhandle Health, if somebody comes in and they've got a septic permit, so if Cameron comes in with a septic permit affiliated with this plan that's signed off by PhD, why the hell do they have to go sign it again? I think it's a waste of time. I would think Panhandle Health would say it's a waste of their time too. So if there are workarounds with agencies, and it's going to be tough because I know the highway districts are going to want to say where the driveway, where the ingress egress is and so on and so forth, but there might be some key on a couple of them. I don't know if the fire districts would let off, but it seems like on a flat parcel where you're not going to have to deal with road elevation, or driveway, pardon me, not road, elevations. God, it seems like some of these agencies, maybe they've never been asked, maybe they have. And I know there's always a power grab there. But it seems like these are some good ideas just to get something flowing, but yet still have the builder assume the liability.
Go ahead, Cameron.
And great point. So one of the things that I've kind of would like to touch on is just some of the topic of 50% of them come through with needing something. I have an inspection report here from Timbered Ridge where, I mean, no offense, all due respect, some of these inspections are coming back. They changed the word deep to thick, and they changed one bolt that could be added at a different time. So yes, 50% might be coming back approved, but we're also changing things that really, 8 inches deep, they changed it thick. Bottom to footing, 24 minimum below grade. I sit and I kind of say, okay, well, did that really need to take 10 weeks for that to get back? It's kind of one of those things you sit there, and I totally agree, and I 100%, we all stood there and we stood against getting rid of the county building, the permit opt-out. Sean spoke at that meeting trying to get away from the opt-out. We see why we need a building department, but you also have to understand, I see what you guys are coming with, but we're liable anyways. And so I get the state wants to make sure that we do it, but that's what our inspections are for. That's what all this is for. And so if we're liable anyways, where can we trade some of that liability for some safety? You know what I mean? If we're a builder, our entire business is risk. And so when we have risk across the board, even in the permitting phase, throughout, how does that make sense for me, at least? So that's something that I would like to touch on, is maybe 50% of those do come back as failed, but what 50% is truly a life safety issue? It's not something that the trusses, yes, they came on backwards. That's a simple copy mistake. We're not going to put the trusses on backwards, and we're going to make sure the HVAC system heats and cools properly. That's not something that if you let go through.
What you're describing, and I went through this somewhat with the opt-out because I think most of you know how I took a strong stand. There's substance and there's process. And I think sometimes the process falls apart and it's not so much the substance, that is to say the plan or whatever. So for example, if you get an inspector who comes out and says this is fine, and then you go to the next phase and the inspector comes out and says, different inspector, and says no good, that's process, that's not code. Somebody screwed up. One of those people is wrong. That goes back to David. Okay, that's a management issue that we have to solve. As far as your liability is concerned, and this is one of the issues, and I don't want to revisit it, but somebody says, hey, I'm taking the liability. The hell you are, because when that individual sells that house 3 years later and now has moved cross-country, who's going to sue him? So there's that liability that you take also survives and it goes on, but that's a whole different issue. But the thing is, we're getting back to process here, and I guess I have full faith and confidence, and I think the board does, in David. So if David can see areas where we can, for lack of a better term, short circuit or abridge the process and not fry those things that shouldn't be fried and make the concessions that we can make to get a quality product and get it in a timely fashion, let's do it. But here's my other question for you folks is, okay, you want rapid turnaround, but you're out quite, just because of the labor shortage, Cameron, that you referred to earlier, as well as other issues, you're out anyway. Even if we could crank a permit in 2 weeks, can you break ground? You're all saying yes.
Because we retained and we built up our team to be able to do that.
Okay, fair enough.
Truly at home sitting, nothing to do. We called David last week, sick to our stomachs because we don't have anything to do next. We have nowhere to send them. And these are families that, I mean, for us, 8 years of working with the same framer, to be able to call and say, hey, I'm doing the best I can, but I don't have one for you.
Okay, okay.
I would love to trade positions and be able to have you guys say that to them, and me sit back and say, ooh, that's not good, because those are uncomfortable conversations.
Okay.
Yes.
David, the other question that I have is, most builders operate on a fixed set of plans, maybe 6 or 8. If there's a slight modification to a plan, can't we short circuit that process? If somebody's adding a room or changing something, what does that do to our process?
I think we can. It will be a change in culture. But I think it's entirely possible. That's why I want to visit with Pat about your idea of if it's signed and sealed, we'll let it go, and then we'll catch up with you as we can. And as long as you are comfortable with that approach, and I can make it work legally, I think I'm fine too. I may lose some of my building inspection staff who tell me that there's no integrity in that process. I frankly don't care at this point because I'm serious, and I'm just up to here with this problem.
Yeah.
Do we know how other jurisdictions around here operate with all the permits that come through to the city of Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls? I mean, can we
I
take
know it's
a page
highly
out of-
variable. I know from experience. You can tell from my gray hair. I've been around more than once. And most municipalities are dramatically different just because of who's at the top and then who's in command underneath, like the chief building official. And the culture of every organization is different. And even though in Texas and Colorado and Idaho, the state sets the bar, you will find Austin is dramatically different from Dallas in some things, in some ways, and so on and so forth. It has to do with local culture.
One question I would have, so the Coeur d'Alene Police Department, all their officers are deputized, just as the sheriff's deputy.
They have to be. They're sworn peace officers.
Yeah, but my point to that is if a Coeur d'Alene officer needs backup or something like that, county would come in. County official, county deputy would come in and help. Is that not something that we can do because you guys are following the same state regulations?
There
I mean, I
again is
understand.
a difference in municipalities.
Coeur d'Alene Police Department, Post Falls Police Department are pretty different, and they can still back each other.
Well, I get that, but that's in the world of policing. Their building inspection departments don't talk that way,
Yeah, it's different.
for instance. They have no such similar
Okay.
compatibility. And that, again, is a cultural difference. I'll dare say, in Colorado, it was a lot easier to do intergovernmental agreements because all the municipalities thought very similarly, and you could bring them to the table more easily. Here, I haven't even been able to have conversations with the CBO at the city about whether we could trade building staff because they don't see the benefit in it. And at this point, I don't either because we're all so behind, it wouldn't be useful. Unless any... Right, that's the cultural difference.
Different.
With respect that your three bosses are in front of you, David, do you see, David, personally, if you're willing to share, anything in the culture that's different here that might be changed that would allow some expediencies to occur?
In the culture of my department?
I would have to assume it would have to be your
Well, the
department in
department.
regards to the county as well, as a whole.
Or your interaction with us, I
have two thoughts. In my department, I think it's actually fairly easy to get most people to go along and change. It's just that it takes time. With other agencies, I can't, it's all bets are off. The other agencies, just let's take PhD, for instance. As much as they would like to be agreeable, I don't think they can do what you want. I don't believe they're willing to go there. They don't have the same access to legal counsel that I do, for instance. They have to go to the Attorney General's office at the state level to get the sort of answer I get by calling upstairs to Pat, Braden, and I know. So I don't think that there's the flexibility here locally, at least that I know of, especially with PhD, the fire districts, and the highway districts.
Well, and I know of a perfect example that's in-house, under this house, and that would be when illegal parcels get created, I can sell a chunk of my land to my next-door neighbor and record it, and it's legal from a legal standpoint, but that's a quote-unquote illegal parcel. David, one of his first horrible tasks with me was unwinding a 14-year-old occasion of this, that the assessor's office finds those things out immediately, and so does the treasurer's office. They could have resolved it 14 years ago by communicating with the planning department. This is when either Rand or Scott was in your position, and they refused to. I asked Mike McDowell, why don't you do this? It's not our job, not our job. And that could have been a recorded notice on title so that when that property sold 10 years after this occurrence, the title company would see it, everything gets shut down instead of everybody winding up in a very potentially expensive liability situation. So it's hard even in-house. And I understand, you commissioners don't have the ability to tell another elected official, hey, assessor, you will do this with our employee, which is David. And I get it. I don't think it's right. I think you should be able to, but you can't. So there's a perfect example of how culture is different.
But I think this board has worked very hard with each elected official to make sure we all are talking to each other about different things. I know that I've started several processes where it comes through community development, then it goes through different stages, and then comes back before the board. So we are definitely looking at that, working that, and I think the elected officials we have right now are willing to do some of those things that you're talking about.
Go ahead, Sean.
One of the things that we talked about was the Premier Builder Program, et cetera, and trying to make sure that that is equitable for the, single builder that's building one house a year. But what if there was an expedient fee that we could pay, a rush fee, something? I mean, I know one of the things that we talked about prior to this meeting was, we have felt that if we had to increase the permit cost for you to to hire more people. But we understand it's not that easy. It's not like you can just say, okay, well, we're going to increase it by 500, and that goes directly to, David's team so that they can hire more staff. It's not that easy. But, I mean, if the legal team comes back and says, well, we can't do this premier program because of XYZ, well, maybe there's a process where we pay. I mean, it would be worth us paying money to get these processes and these products.
And actually, to your point, David just concluded a study along with the auditor to see if, in fact, we could do that. And we found that the fees that we currently had in place were antiquated. There was no rationale for them. And I think, didn't we already pass it?
No, it's coming before you, but to be clear, the building permit fees were relatively close. It was planning fees that are as much as 500% off, meaning we've been charging 1/5 of what we should have been for the actual cost.
Right, so that's coming before us for approval. Yeah.
Yes.
And remember too that we're also dealing with state law, and those are the folks you send to Boise. They pass the laws that govern what we can and cannot do. So when somebody comes to us and says, you need to charge impact fees, well, yeah, but they don't necessarily work well for counties, or other issues that people would bring up, and they don't realize that we have parameters that we have to operate within, and therein lies the issue. And I don't want to go there, but we have laws that we have to abide by. Now, there are certain things we can do within the framework of the law, and we can move quickly. But in other cases, we simply can't. He cannot make a profit. If we're going to raise fees, those fees must be associated with cost. He is not permitted by law to turn a profit.
So one other thing that I'd like to ask, I know you guys have outside agencies you guys are sending plans to, instead of, you know, that's more of a privatized system, but would, instead of a premier builder setup, could us builders go through them first to expedite it when it gets to you guys? I mean, if they're able to take on 30 plans a week, would that be an avenue that we could take to go to the Northwest
We had looked at that.
construction consultants or the other ones in Colorado to then come to you guys and basically they're approved, you guys need to look over a small portion of it to expedite it and we pay them outside of the county?
Cameron, just to make sure I understand your point, are you suggesting that you'd be able to send plans directly to Northwest or our other consultants, let them do their thing and tell us it's okay? And that way it wouldn't actually land in us until, in our department, until Northwest said it was fine.
Correct.
Then it's just a matter of outside agency review. Is that your
Correct.
point?
Correct. And then that wouldn't hurt the private industry, the one-off home builder. They would have the same avenue to do that depending on what they wanted to pay those guys.
I like that idea. Let's pursue it.
There is an issue. Before coming up here, I spent 15 years as a consultant doing just that, contract plan review and inspections. The biggest issue with the developer going directly to the outside company is that the other half of the equation, the planning side, also takes time. So unless the whole thing is started at the same time, it's not gonna help.
Well, I think I disagree, John. What they're saying is they would avoid our current 10 to 12 week process by getting Northwest Consultants to do it in, I'll make this up, 3 weeks. And then it would land in our office. Planning typically turns things around in less than a month, sometimes 2 weeks.
Could you do the planning concurrent with the outside source?
You could.
And on that type of thing, third-party review, it is something we've looked at. Locally, there's no firms around that I have confidence in, frankly. It is possible to set it up to do that. There would have to be a provision that before you went to them, you had an actual application in so that the planning process can get started and hopefully everything come out at the same time.
But I think what's different today, John, than what you just said, when you and I looked at this in the past, is now we have a consultant on board and we're about to hire a second one and possibly even a third. If they went directly to any of those 3 that we've already agreed to, that would be an expedited process.
Yes, I agree with that. As long as they put the permit application, let us know that they're sending the plans to directly. The contractor would be.
Yeah.
That consultant.
I'm confused. If those agencies, those outside, those third-party reviewers, if they have the capacity to do what Cameron's saying, why don't you guys just shovel them through faster to them? Where's the?
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Is it a fee structure that the county can?
No. And well, let me separate some issues, Tom. That separate in your mind agencies from our consultants. These are 2 very different things. Okay, agencies we have no control over. Our consultants we have all control over. But right now today we have 1 consultant doing 10 plans at most a week. We have 2 more in the wings. One I think will come on board next week. It'll bump it up another additional 30 plans a week
It's a lot.
at most, 20 at least. And that's the national firm that's California and Colorado based. We have the 3rd building inspector I told you about, SIBO, who's willing to come out of retirement. In each of those cases, we have contracts for them where once we get an application, we send it over to them. There's a slowdown at that, there's a bottleneck at that point where we become a bottleneck making sure your new plans get directly to the consultant. What Cameron's suggesting that's different is you go directly to our consultants and then they send us the plan saying, stamping them saying they're okay.
And with that consultant might be able to set whatever fee structure is so that they could dedicate more employees, for example, in order to take the extra rush of these direct to consultant.
Yes, I will tell you that the consultants have the same problem we do. The pool of candidates is small, just like it is for you.
David, we've got another meeting
Okay.
that's
Yeah,
going to
we
be
do. It
occurring in
starts
here.
now.
So can we summarize, where do you think we're, go ahead.
This has been helpful and productive for me. I'm going to take your comments to heart. I'll talk to Pat Braden today, and I'll get back with you as soon as possible on where we are on that.
Okay, but give us the 2 or 3 most salient points. Go ahead.
We're looking at an expedited review, 2 expedited reviews. One where if we accept a full set of plans that are stamped and sealed by whichever applies, architect or engineer, then we can issue a permit immediately or within a few days under certain refined, agreed upon circumstances.
Go ahead.
That's option 1. Option 2 is we're looking at a direct pass-through where the builders can go to consultants that we've pre-approved, get their plans approved and send it to us. That could expedite things considerably, I would think. We've never done it before, but it's worth looking.
David, you just, the first scenario you said the whole permit. I thought that is a third scenario then, or if the whole permit isn't acceptable to Pat, then the foundation permit?
Well, I thought we took the foundation off the table. We do that today. We do it today. You just haven't been able to get through our process.
But they do the whole review.
But we allow foundation-only permits today. The problem we have is that we still try and link up your plans with the foundation. What's completely different about what we just do today and what you want to do is the process thing that I need to get our legal counsel to tell me it's okay to do, where you take all the responsibility, not liability, responsibility for things that you potentially screw up and we can't change.
But would you, okay, so let's say you issue the permit on a signed plan. Would you then still at least continue to review it? So hopefully by the time you were done with the foundation, if there were issues, the county would catch them? Because then the builder could choose, okay, we got the foundation in, but we haven't got the review back. Maybe we should wait until.
On the foundation only, you mean?
Well, or even if you did the whole permit, are you still gonna do the review? Or otherwise, are you saying the only way we're gonna find something is upon inspection? But because by then, it might be exceedingly expensive to correct.
What we were thinking was the first option would have been if it was stamped and approved or pre-built, it would be a foundation only permit. That way we could expedite the 2 months that you're going to need to be able to get your inspectors in line. Plan reviewers in line. And then once that foundation only permit was approved, we could get it in the ground while you guys still reviewed the plan and said, oh, there's a missing bearing pad, or this truss, whatever it may be, is backwards, and then we could actually still proceed forward. I understand we're doing foundation-only permits now, but
Okay.
So I think that we're going to have a lot of back and forth, a lot of ways to build this clock. So I think we know what time it is as far as
got another
we've got a
meeting.
great, no, I don't mean literal time, I mean figurative time. So I propose that David move forward with contacting legal to see if we can take some of the suggestions and put them into practice, and that David is allowed to continue to converse with the group and work details out. It's his job.
You know, and let me, I just want to make a final point. In terms of the builders going directly to the agencies, Panhandle Health, Highway, I don't know that that's going to save any time, and if anything, it may create a problem, because if he loses control and something is missing, we got a problem. That won't expedite the process any, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. Fair enough. Okay, thank you, everyone.
thank you very much for everyone's time.
Let's make some progress. Meeting adjourned, 11:04 a.m. Thank you.